So when I'm stacking a cake, I always do the raw part or the inside of the cake up when I'm building. I also put my icing in the very center, get my spatula down in there, and turn from there. So I get a nice even layer of frosting. It's important, creates less leveling. Okay, so this is a multiple stacked cake at this point. It really needs stabilization. You could at this point or before have put a plate underneath and actually created a real stacked cake like a wedding cake, but these are pretty light layers. They're only 8-inch round. So I'm gonna use a technique with straws. You want 3. You want to stick them down in a triangle shape. This will keep my layers nice straight up and down while I'm working on them. And go ahead and trim them at the top. Gives me nice stability around the place where I'm going to put my doll. So we want to find the center and mark it. And then we're going to cut about the size of a silver dollar around that. You really don't want a big hole because we don't want our Barbie sloshing around in there. Then I'm going to take a regular steak knife. It's about the right length. You can see here that the knife doesn't go all the way down to the bottom, and that's what we want. We're going to go ahead and just cut our little hole out. We've already tested that this cake is going to come, when the Barbie's down in there, just about to her hip line, and that's where we want it to be. So we're going to mark about 1 inch in all the way around. So at this mark, we're going to come from the top at an angle about like this, and we're just going to cut around at that 1 inch mark. We really don't need to cut any more than the top layer, and that's going to give us the starting shape for our skirt. And see, as I come around, I'm continuing at an angle. And I've got a nice even ring. So I'm going to use the icing from our filling to go ahead and give this a little crumb ice. Don't really usually need to add any extra icing, but we're just going to make it nice and smooth. Going to make it nice and smooth and seal down any crumbs. Next, I'm going to use the quick ice tip. This gives me a nice even layer of icing to start with to begin my first icing on this before we start decorating. You can see it's a nice wide tip, creates a nice even layer. So decorators, this is no different. You really want to keep that 45-degree angle and your pressure here so that we're not hurting our hands. Keep the pressure on the back. You want to turn the turntable as you squeeze the bag. You don't really want to be moving the bag so much as the turntable. So we're going to start here at the top. See the nice thin layer that creates, and just keep moving down. So next I'm going to use my table scraper here to smooth out my icing. This is a really great professional tool. This one happens to be made out of plastic. You can find these at paint stores for putting on Bondo. There are also nice metal, what's called a bench knife, that you can get at some of your kitchen stores. So you can also get them at your restaurant supplies. So for this, again, we are turning the turntable, not so much moving our arms. I'm going to start at this side and turn around this way. It's hard to see my body posture at this point, but you really want your elbows out You want to keep your knees loose, and you want to be able to have a lot of movement around your cake like this. So I'm going to start here and just pull lightly, light pressure on my table scraper. Okay. So I'm really moving only about maybe a quarter to a third around my cake with my scraper. Mostly I'm turning the turntable. So this is really our first layer, and you can see we've got a little show through, and that's okay. We're gonna coat this cake with all of our layers of icing and borders. So we're gonna get our Barbie down in. Now we've pre-measured to make sure that we've got the right height. So we're gonna get her down in just about upper hip level. We're gonna fill in a little bit with icing. You wanna keep Barbie's hands over her head and get her hair up in a rubber band so that we're not interfering with the rest of our cake at that point. We're going to use our quick icer again, and we're going to fill in here around her waist. You want to be careful not to go up too high to begin the skirt. It'll look a little strange. You want to just even her out here, not add too much more icing, because we've got a lot of layers of dress. Okay, I'm just going to come back around, just smooth a little bit. You don't want to overwork, because keep in mind we're going to cover this with layers of decoration. So it's a great idea to sketch out the design beforehand. So this is what I'm thinking about doing. I want to do a basic princess cake. You can see I've got some garlands planned for the bottom and some ruffles planned for here. Planning a little lace over the top here and a sweetheart bodice. It's a great idea to plan out the back also, so you have a good idea of what it's going to look like in advance. If you're a really experienced decorator, you can kind of wing it, but I still even like to have a good idea of what I'm going to do ahead of time. So I want to show marking the cake. We have our design, and now we need to mark that design on the cake so we have a good idea of where it's going to go. You can use any of your standard marking tools. You can use your half cup, you can use your Wilton garland marking tools, or you can just use a dowel. For now I'm just going to use a dowel. I want to freehand a little bit. I don't want it so tight. So I want to find her belly button and mark straight down the front of my cake so that I know exactly where my front is. I want to come over about a third way around and mark again. And then you just want to take a look. Make sure that's where you want your skirt to fall. I think I'm going to move it in just a little from there. So I want my cake to have a nice flow open skirt. So I kind of want to check just to make sure they're nice and even. So I'm right about 2 there and right about 2 here. That helps a lot. Then we want to move around to the back side of the cake, do exactly the same thing, and mark down from the back. Here we're going to decide how far down the side our garlands are going to go and how many in between. Looks like we're going to have about 3. Okay, so I'm going to use my quick icing tool here again to get a nice even top layer. For those of you who know, I'm really crazy about color striping, but for this we actually mix the bag of some light purple. I'm going to put my first layer of ruffles on with the quick icing bag. We're going to start here at her waist and move down and make the first garland. I'm going to come down and make my second. Okay, so now I'm going to work on the other side. So at this point I want this area to be a little bit smooth. So I'm going to use a little bit of a different technique and just kind of pull down and up, make like the petal of a flower. So this is an awful lot like our petals that we've used for hibiscus. If you've seen any of those videos, we do a squeeze, we let it build, move down just a little, pull back up as we release. You don't want any thickness at our waist, so this is a perfect petal for that. Squeeze, let it build at the edge, pull back and release. Squeeze lightly, let it build at the edge, pull back and release. See how thin we're getting up in here? Leaves us lots of nice space to create decoration at her waist. So this is a good example. As we got going here, I thought I was going to do a ruffle, and as it turned out, it worked more into flower petals, which I really like better. You can see as you go, you kind of adjust to what you're working with and what really looks nice at the time. So I just want to say at this point that I'm actually working on the opposite side of the cake so you can see from your vantage point. I can't actually see this side while I'm working on it, so you can see we've got a little bit of gap here. That's okay, we can cover it with a ruffle, no problem. But for you, you're going to want to work on your own side of the cake. It's way less awkward, much easier too. So using the quick icer to make this petal is great for you beginning decorators because you can cover a lot of space. It's quite easy to use. For you commercial or advanced decorators or people who are doing a lot of work, you can see how much space I covered in a short amount of time, but I still have a very pretty effect. So keep that in mind. It's great for speed, also great for beginners. So at this point I'm going to work in white on the front of the cake, but I do want to stay true to my design here. So I want to make sure that my first garland is equal with this, so let's make some dots across here, and I want it to be right centered. So then that gives me the space for my garlands on the side. I know right where they're going to be. Again, you want to do this facing yourself. There we go. So you got a good idea what that looks like. I want to create kind of a lace here in the front, a lace look, a ruffled look. And I'm going to use my number 24 shell tip for this. Want a nice full border. If you're a beginner, want to make sure that you're spacing these even using your 1 and 2 and technique. So I want to create ruffles that actually cover the bottom border. I've already got it marked here, and that's where I want my garlands. So I'm going to come down just a bit and put my marks for my ruffle. A ruffle is pretty even pressure control with a slight up and down movement. Now, the only part of this that is a little difficult is at the beginning and the end of your ruffle, you need to lessen that pressure control so that you have a finer edge at the beginning and the end. I'll demonstrate. Now I want to place my garlands over my ruffles. So they are going to need to cover the top edge of the ruffle. Also, it's a lot the same movement. On this garland, I'm just going to use a ruffle movement. Also, I need them to be thinner at the beginning and the end, thicker in the center. So I'm going to begin very light pressure control, begin to build, and now release. Very light pressure, larger zigzag, larger pressure, lighter pressure again. I'm going to do a double garland here in the front. Same movement, just over the top. It's going to give me another layer of frilly ruffly. Now we're kind of just adding layers of pretty stuff. We're also going to cover any gaps that we have. So I want to add another layer of ruffle around the edge of my petal here. I don't want to come all the way up. I want to start maybe right in here, a very, very thin ruffle, and get bigger. Make sure to angle your rose tip up. I've added a little bit of a darker color and a stripe. So I've got a writing tip here that I'm going to use for the bodice anyway. So I thought I'd drop some string work in the front. This is a little more of an advanced move. So with string work, it's all about pressure. We're going to drop the string. So we're going to squeeze, pull out, let it drop, and reattach. So you can see I'm leading my string ever so lightly. Okay, so we're going to start the bodice of the dress. This also may be considered like the bustier, but for our little princess, more appropriate bodice. We're going to start right here in the middle and create a little sweetheart neckline, which looks like the top of a heart. Come up and over, and just down under the armpit where we're going to stop. Come around this side, come up and over, just to under the armpit where we're going to stop. The reason that we do that is so we can get a nice even back. We're going to come around from here and drop all the way down to a point in the back. At this point, we want to fill in the bodice. This is mainly our little guide. We can use dots, or we can also use the E motion, which I'm going to use for this one to get a little more design. We want to start at the top instead of at the bottom like we did this way, because we want to get smaller as we get to her waist. So we're going to start here, create our little E. So you can see it's upside down from what we did before. Still the same motion, squeeze and release, squeeze and release. All the way around to the back side. Can you still see? So I'm creating a V as I go down, and I'm using much, much lighter pressure control down into here. I don't want a lot of thick icing. Okay. So I want to create a nice little point here in the middle. I'm just going to take one more pass to create the waist of the bodice. Come on around. So before I create my little peplum, I want to create just a little bit of lace. And if those of you who've watched our sunflower video, I'm making just a little corneli lace. It's a very small cut in the end of a bag, or a very small rider, and kind of a squiggly, random S shape. Now remember that we're just creating layers of pretty stuff, and you can stop at any point. This is where the dress designer in you comes out, where you get to decide if more is more or less is more. So I still want to add my little peplum. Don't have to, but I'm going to go for it. So I'm going to put a couple of little rosebuds here. This is actually the center of a sweet pea that I'm going to use. It's a squeeze and release, like a shell border, but we're using a rose tip. Squeeze, let it build, rock back, release. Squeeze, let it build inward, rotate slightly, release. Let it build inward, rotate slightly, release. Okay, now I want to put an actual rosebud here. Okay. Now we want 3 very small petals. Squeeze, let it build, release. Squeeze, let it build, release. Squeeze, let it build, release. For a rosebud, we're just going to take 1 petal that goes all the way around and release. So as you can see, you can get a little carried away with the decorating on your princess or Barbie cake. This one, we've got a lot of layers going on. Again, you can do less, you can do more. At this point, I'm gonna leave you with the cake at this level. We're actually gonna move on and make her into a Southern lady with an umbrella and the hat. I'm gonna leave you with just a pearl necklace, and we'll see you next time.